if a Web3 game doesn't have that financial upside and that token is not gonna, even like a slight upside, I'm not sure if the current Korean players will be even playing it, right?
In our last episode, we covered eSports with Ilya, and we covered Korea's role in providing legitimacy to that form of entertainment. But what was really absent in that episode was Korean-made games. The esports games were primarily made by American companies like Magic, StarCraft, and League of Legends. So this episode, we want to cover, what are Korean game developers doing in making traditional games or Web2 games, Web3 games, and Metaverse games.
Yeah, the first thing we notice about Korean games is that the content category isn't as successful. And I'm just air quoting it because
Mm-hmm.
it is successful, but compared to K-pop, compared to Korean TV shows, this is the soft conclusion that we're giving out, right?
Right.
And we're gonna just show you guys some numbers. We're gonna compare it to our neighboring countries such as China and Japan. And yeah, like the businesses that want to be big globally need to be big in at least, but ideally as many as possible in markets such as North America, Europe, Japan, and China. The Japanese market and the Japanese countries has always been a global leader in these four markets, along obviously with the US in terms of gaming. And it's much harder for local Korean companies to expand beyond their shores. And we're gonna give you guys more examples of what we were trying to say here. Yeah, so John, I think like any other episode, we need to start with some historic context. Can we start from the beginning and tell us how it started?
Sure. And I think, you know, from working in tech and gaming, I think those two industries are always so forward looking. We never look at the past, but, researching the history for this podcast, I think that we could just learn a lot. And it sets the foundation of why things happened the way they did. So I'll give a really quick overview of, the 1970s to 1990s because not much happened. So essentially, based on some lore, some companies or people imported arcades to service the U.S. service member station in Korea. In terms of official newspaper records in 1975, there were 3 Pong machines installed in the Midopa department store in Seoul.
What are Pong machines, by the way?
Pong, it's the
I need
game,
to.
Pong. It's like
God,
you'll
okay.
see later, but you basically have like a bar. I have a bar, and the ball goes back and forth.
Ah, okay, okay,
It's
okay.
it's the Pong. Um, so in the by 1980s, 43 arcades were officially government approved, and hundreds were operating illegally. And this is kind of like a precursor to the PC bongs, which also have to be government approved. In this case, it was a little bit more serious because there were gambling machines, just like
Mm-hmm.
the slot machines you see in Vegas
Right,
or any
right,
other
right, right,
casinos. And I think the government conflated gambling machines with arcades with video games,
right.
which are more targeted towards kids. That being said, by 1982 there were 3.5 thousand illegal
Wow.
arcades, and then 20,000 by 1983. So 1983, the government passed a law to distinguish between, arcades for entertainment versus gambling. And then there was some slow effort in importing console games from Japan, but it was always slow because Korea didn't have a vibrant, IP protection laws. The 90s were the most interesting because it kind of relates to what we covered in the esports episode. So that's stuff like high speed internet investment from the government. That's stuff like the PC bongs, and then the Korean game devs actually making online games for PCs.
Right. Yeah, and then talking about like the comparison between Korean companies and Japanese companies, the Korean gaming market skipped the console market and went directly straight to PC and now to mobile, as you said, John. And I think in Japan went console and then mobile. We are seeing some growth in the PC, but definitely like more console and mobile, right? In Japan, the initial rivalry in the early 90s was between Sega and Nintendo, and then the new contender Sony entered the business, and now these are like the top. They have always been in the top five gaming companies in Japan. Um, yeah, so in the recent years, as I said, the PC gaming market in Japan has been steadily growing, but of course, like compared to what's seen in the US and Korea, it's relatively small. Korea focus on PC and mobile games because, and this is the why that we want to emphasize, it's because the Japanese own the console market. We were relatively late in the gaming producing industry compared to like US and Japan, and because we knew, I guess, from the early days that we couldn't like penetrate this like already established console market, we decided to like shift directly to PC. And it's also important to highlight that Japanese consoles were really hard to acquire in Korea, not only because it was expensive, there was also a tax that kind of like impeded from like Korean consumers to like directly import these consoles. And there's like a very interesting saying like back then, if you knew you were rich if you had like these consoles at home, right? And if you knew your father was successful if he was able to fly to Hong Kong or Japan or the US and get these consoles directly, and even like get a extension cord to like, it was not the same
Right.
plug, right? So
Right.
that was like what was happening in the early 90s, I guess. And again, like back then, video game piracy was rampant, and the console makers didn't want to invest in the Korean market. That's why free to play concept was born out of the Korean PC gaming companies. And then just to like conclude the statement will be like the game genre the Korean domestic developers found the most success will be MMOs like Maple Story, Lineage, and Ragnarok Online.
And I think that game genre, MMOs, are really important for when we talk about the Metaverse games, and also just how that game genre wasn't as or isn't as popular as other genres today. Last night, I looked at the top 10 games on Steam based on engagement over the past 30 days. And 6 out of the top 10 were first person shooters. So it would be games like Counter Strike 2, Helldivers 2, Rainbow Six, PUBG, Call of Duty, Apex Legends. And one of these 6 FPS games was actually developed by a Korean game developer called Krafton, which we'll talk about later. And many of these games are also free to play, as you mentioned. So let's talk a little bit about that monetization strategy, because it is the dominant monetization strategy today of the biggest games, and it was invented in Korea. High level, anyone can play the game for free, and the only items you would buy are mainly cosmetic. And a lot of people may not understand why you would care about maybe what you look like, or maybe like a skin, or how your gun essentially in these FPS games look like. But people do care, and even me. I wasn't really a big FPS player. I recently started playing Valorant, and you don't need to buy anything. But I was like, you know what? The skin looks kind of good.
It's for the vanity.
I'm gonna buy it. And some of these skins are like one of the skins I bought recently. You convert the digital currency to US dollars. It was like $50.
Oh wow!
So some of these games that you could buy off the shelf are $50, $60. So now you can even buy one skin and it's that much. So you can see how that's like kind of how the monetization works nowadays.
Right.
So let's talk about the. I want to get a sense of like how big these Korean developers are, because we do that. How big are these Korean tech companies? How big are these Korean like TV production companies?
Yeah, and it's really important because like going back to how we started this episode, we said, compared to K-pop, compared to TV shows, Korean companies, the Korean gaming companies are relatively smaller compared to the Japanese, Chinese, and obviously the American ones. So going back to 2022, unfortunately we couldn't find the 2023 annual revenues, but this chart, as you guys will be seeing on the table here, Korea, the top 5 companies in terms of annual revenues will be Nexon generating 2.48 billion, Netmarble 2 billion, NC Soft following that, Krafton and Pearl Abyss. Japan, if you look at Sony, it was making 27 billion. So that's like, at least like 2-digit multipliers compared to like the Korean companies. Nintendo 13.9 billion, Square Enix, Bandai Namco, and Sega. The Chinese companies, again, like much bigger than the Korean companies, 25.5 billion, NetEase 11.5 billion, MiHoYo 3.8 billion, 37 World, and Perfect World following that. So again, this chart clearly shows what we said in the beginning, where the Korean companies, they are well known, they're producing amazing content, all the AAA gaming companies, but unfortunately, in terms of revenues and market cap as well, they're not as big as the Japanese and Chinese competitors out there.
Right. And which is why there isn't too much to say about them for this episode. When we're talking about other Korean content, it's just so globally well known, especially let's say like K-pop. You could rattle a bunch of idols' names off. But I did want to give a quick highlight of each of the big 5 Korean game devs. Just some fun facts or interesting products they may have. The first is Nexon. We talked about them. They're the company that actually invented the free-to-play model, which became ubiquitous globally. They are Korea's biggest game dev. Later, we'll talk about their relationship with Japan, but I believe they're one of the first game devs to push into Japan. Netmarble. Netmarble is interesting. They have a couple games, but I think most Western audiences wouldn't know about them. So I want to talk about something else I found recently, which was we mentioned that whether it's the Chaebols or the Korean tech companies, everyone seems to own each other.
Mixed blood.
And it seems it's just a very interesting situation. So, for example, some of the companies we covered in episodes 1 and 2. So Netmarble is owned roughly 20% by Hive. Market caps change. And also roughly 20% by CJENM, which is interesting. And then Tencent owned 18%. And NC Soft, which is the next developer I was mentioned, they owned 7%. NC Soft is most known for Lineage, and their most well-known game in the West was called City of Heroes. Krafton, I think, is the most well-known Korean developer and brand.
Which not a lot of people know that it's a Korean company, by the way.
That is interesting. Yeah. Maybe it was done on purpose, but as I mentioned, they developed PUBG. It's the only Korean game that is perennially, in a top 10 status globally, whether it's PC or mobile. And then Pearl Abyss, I mainly knew them for a game called Black Desert Online, but it wasn't a huge globally well-known or successful game. But it was really popular in this kind of MMO genre, which is why I had to study it when I worked at Amazon Games and we're developing New World. What was also super interesting about Pearl Abyss is that, of all things, they own CCP, which is the developer of EVE Online, which is one of the most fascinating games ever. And we could dive a lot more into that. But the high-level summary is in EVE Online, people they essentially have jobs. So they could be a miner, they could be a politician, you could be a CEO of a corporation.
Oh, that's crazy! Really?
And they have this whole off game mechanism in Discord, and they have staff meetings, they have all sorts of stuff on how do we improve our company. And how do we and they may call company a different word than what I'm using. And, they have different governments. Right. And every couple years they have these major wars because it takes so long to amass firepower and things like that. And there's you could be a spy. Some people become a spy for 3 years.
Right.
So it's you joining someone else's Zoom calls.
And that's the game component, right?
That happened. So it's in the game. It's also outside the game. Because half this game is played outside the game.
Because the outside game kind of sounds like a metaverse, right?
Kind of. It sounds like a job, actually. It's as if I download to Zoom. We're hey, what are we doing this week?
Your avatar just developing the character.
Right.
That's amazing. But before we move on, I actually didn't know this, and it was super interesting that you highlighted that Netmarble was owned roughly by 20% by Hive and by Tencent. Oh, if the Tencent part is not that interesting, but CJENM and Hive. and I think this really highlights on the fact that, you know, Hype, the K-pop, the CJ, and the K-pop and content
Mm-hmm.
companies are bigger than, kind of like they can own the shares.
That's true.
Maybe Netmarble also owns shares of Hype. We didn't look at that part,
Right, right.
but it feels like the macro is more like in Korea it's like K-pop, K-content, and the gaming
Mm-hmm.
is just, you know, a portion of that, right?
Right, right. What I also noticed is that, so I mentioned Nexon owned part of Netmarble. Based on some light research last week, it seems like Nexon was trying to do like a hostile takeover.
Got it.
So that is also a very interesting component of Korean equity market, which we don't really see that much in America these days. You don't really hear about the hostile takeovers. I think it was a thing of like the 80s and the 90s.
Hostile takeovers happens like with the hedge funds, like
Right,
the
right.
evil finance guys, not between like, I guess, like friendly competitors in the same
That's true.
industry.
But in Korea, I mean, we had the whole about the cacao and hype over SM,
Yes,
and then I learned
yes.
about this. I'm sure we can find out a lot more. So I think there's a lot more interesting things to dig into Web3 and Metaverse. So can you give a quick summary of what we've learned about Korean so-called Web2 games or traditional games?
All right. I think you know, it's really hard to just like do a general
Yes.
conclusion of it, but our very high level summary is that, you know, everyone in the gaming industry will agree that it's a very ultra competitive market, and it applies to the Korean companies as well. Um, I guess in the K content and the K-pop TV series, we said that it's, you know, they start with the Korean market and then they expand to like other Asian countries and then they expand globally. So now they have that playbook. But I think it's harder for the Korean companies to execute on that playbook just because there's so many big competitors out there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you know, Japan, again, it's we've seen that it's like the largest market, one of the largest markets. They have good economy. They were able to like buy exported content from Korea, and it's the same with TV series and music. But it's just like the dynamic is hard with games. Like the Japanese people will not be consuming right away the
Mm-hmm.
Korean games, right? Um, yeah. So just to do like a highlight summary again with the Korean big top five companies, Nixon is the biggest gaming company by revenue, and then you did mention this, but you know, Nixon was actually relocated their HQ from South Korea to Japan, and they even listed their stock. They went public in the Tokyo Stock Exchange, not in Korea. And the reason why they did this, they had like a huge PR when did this happen, and they said we chose Japan because we wanted to do real business in a big and stable market. So I think it's a two like prong reasoning. So it's like the Japanese stock market is bigger than the Korean one, and I feel like they wanted to have like this stool like that, it's pedaled to go to a global market, and they knew that going into the Japanese market it's a bigger market for them to reach like a bigger gaming ecosystem, I would say. um
And I think a lot of this going back to the big Korean ambitions, expand globally, but given this content type, unlike the other ones we talked about, it seems like Korean game devs have less tools or options to grow bigger. So, and I think that's one reason um, Korean game devs have really leaned into like Web3, which is what we're going to talk about next. So, you just attended GDC. I heard that Web3 games were a highlight. Tell us some insights.
I This was my first GDC, John, so
Mm-hmm.
I do not have a benchmark compared to like the previous one or two
Right,
years
right.
ago, but I did notice that the Web3 booths were right next to the main escalator. And you know, whichever convention or conference you go,
Right, right, right.
with the company that gets the prime location, that's like a statement, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that was Avalanche, just as an example. And Avalanche, just to give you guys some more context, it's a layer one blockchain. And they do focus on games. They have a gaming team, and they want to onboard more like AAA gaming companies. And they had a main booth right next to the main escalator in the South Hall,
Mm-hmm.
and it was amazing because everyone going that the escalator, even if you did not want to see anything about Web3 and you're anti Web3, you had to see the Avalanche booth, right? And they had games. They're like flagship games that they showcased in GDC were games like Shrapnel, Providence, Blood Loop, and yeah, like all these like KOLs and even like just normal, not only like Web3 KOLs, but just gamers in general were all lining up to like play these games, which was interesting. You
Mm-hmm,
know, like
mm-hmm.
I thought, I guess like more like natively crypto Web3 as like a Web3 native person, I thought like the sentiment GDC was gonna be like anti Web3 games, but it wasn't. I don't think the sentiment towards like Web3 was like that negative.
And I think, based on, every conference, there's a bunch of people on LinkedIn who just talk about, them going to the conference, what they're doing at the conference, and their summaries. So I read a couple summaries. And actually, the summaries align with a lot of what you said, which was the capital and attention for, it's weird to call it traditional games, but Web2 games or traditional games
Mm-hmm.
was relatively low because the big game developers are still going to make their massive investments of double digit, even triple digit $1 million
Mm-hmm.
just to make like one great live service game. It seemed like at least in previous GDCs I've been to, it was pretty anti Web3 and anti crypto, but this year frankly I think it's just like necessity due to the layoffs and whatnot. People are just having a more open mind to different opportunities, and it seems like Web3 game investment is still happening. So maybe we should really even talk a little bit about uh, crypto. Zooming back to Korea. And I learned a lot about this primarily through you. I even went to the Korea Blockchain Week a couple years ago. I think it's like 2 years ago. So just it seems like Koreans are really into not only Web3 games but crypto. And I know it's a much bigger story, but let us know your opinion on like why are Koreans so into crypto and Web3.
It's not only Koreans.
Mm-hmm.
I think I guess it's not only Asians either, but just like we are. It's a demographics like Asians and Koreans in general are their main life goal, I will say, or maybe this is like too much of a generalization, but
Mm-hmm.
it's to build wealth, right?
Right.
But it's even harder these days, and I think my generation especially, we're just stuck in that generation where our parents at least had a house, like they
Mm-hmm.
had something, they had a property they owned, they had something under their names. But it doesn't matter if you went to the best top universities, you come from like a good family, you have like you're in the top 1% of the tax bracket. No, I don't know how many friends in my generation will be able to buy a house, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that perception of just like getting, you need to accumulate wealth, you need to make your parents proud and
Mm-hmm.
all, that whole like ordeal, but also just like, but you need to do it fast because you want to get married, you need to establish that independence. That wealth plus I need to do it fast just got the best product market fit with crypto, I would say, which is good and bad, obviously, like
Right. Right. Right.
like and that's why like you were saying, John, that we also celebrate Lunar New Year, and in Chinese New Year, like the phrase that we say for like Happy New Year would be like, hope you get rich,
Mm-hmm.
hope you find wealth, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that whole representation of that stereotype of like Asians want to build wealth, like it's such a big important thing for our values. Like everything in your life is aligned to wealth, right? Um,
Right.
so yeah, like Chinese are big in crypto. We have a lot of like Chinese shareholders in the crypto ecosystem. But they like the Chinese government cracked down crypto heavily the past couple of years. So a lot of the Chinese companies had to either were forced essentially to move out of China, go to either Hong Kong or Singapore. And then Singapore, that's why became a hub of all these like Chinese funds, Chinese projects, and so forth. But again, like Hong Kong, there's like a lot of political tensions and it's like closer to mainland, and like that whole like social political thing. Hong Kong also became kind of hostile. People are like wary to just establish companies there, so they were also pushed out to other Southeast Asian countries, including Singapore. The Japanese crypto sentiment is really interesting because the Japanese government was one of the first governments to actually impose like really really clear like regulations of crypto, even before the states, even before like all these like European countries. So I think now is the time where like the SEC is like heavily looking at like, what are we gonna do with like all these like tokens. But I think Japan was already regulating crypto from like Bitcoin days. before
Mm-hmm.
Ethereum was a thing, right? So it's hard for Japanese consumers like retail or even like wholesale, like anyone in the Japanese market to be looking at crypto as aggressive as a Korean.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I need to make this comparison between like the Chinese, Japanese, just because they're like our direct neighbors, because all the things that favors why there's like a big crypto adoption in Korea
Mm-hmm.
is there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, like I'm not saying in Korea we still have like a lot of gray area regulations, and that is a threat, and that is a risk for not only individual investors, people creating Web3 projects, and for, but yeah, that's why we have the product market fit, and that's why we were like so into crypto.
Right. So so I agree with you. I think there's some stereotypes, but some stereotypes I think are somewhat accurate. And I do think I see this not only geographic desire, which definitely happens, we'll call it Asia, East Asia, you really all of Asia, Southeast Asia too, but also the demographic part, which I didn't even think about, because I do think even the U.S., a lot of the we'll call it like the generation younger than me, which I think is Gen Z, and Alpha, they're too young, so it's really just Gen Z. They share a lot of sentiments you said too, which is even in America, their parents have the house and they can't get a house. But back to stereotype part, which I think is kind of interesting, which relates to our TV show episode. In almost every K drama I see, when it comes to dating,
Oh yeah.
the mother-in-law or like prospective girlfriends or boyfriend's mother is always something like, hey, like, do they have property? And it just it's not even like a joke. It's just like, oh, it's a thing people ask. So I want to really like get into, because in the U.S. obviously real estate's big too, but I feel like it's just even bigger deal in Asia. Which, and because real estate requires so much upfront investment, that kind of fuels a narrative of why crypto, because higher volatility, and maybe you're buying something early versus you're buying like Walmart stock or something like that, right?
So
Which is doing great, by the way. But yes, yeah.
oh, so I think the underlying premise here is that Asians in general, whether that
Mm-hmm.
is like the North, the Southeast Asians, like even like Chinese Americans,
Mm-hmm.
Korean Americans, like we can see that real estate. If you talk to like the elderly generation, even
Right.
like my generation, like real estate is the prime asset class. It does
Mm-hmm.
like ETF stocks, no, like you need to have a house, and then let's talk about like other asset classes,
Right.
right?
Right.
So that, like buying a house and having that property under your name is the basis of your life, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's, they feel like that's like the concrete you need to lay down,
Mm-hmm.
and then you build your life on funds. But buying a house or even renting a house is in Korea is expensive. It's like ridiculous, right? So just to give you guys some numbers, like the average transaction for high-rise apartments in Seoul in January to November last year, so 2023, was approximately 4.2 million won, which is like $3,100 per square meter. And it's not like we have insanely big houses like the
Right.
States
Right.
here,
Right.
but it's really expensive. And this is even, it's such a big problem because we have a high concentration of our population around Seoul and Seoul
Mm-hmm.
metropolitan.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a scarcity of good property. Prices are like going up like crazy. COVID didn't stop the prices from like rising. There, like our country is not hit by hyperinflation compared to like other countries such as like I don't know, like Turkey for example,
Mm-hmm.
or like Argentina. Like, like we're not in hyperinflation or not even inflation compared to like US, I will say. But real estate is just insane to just get a hand like a hold on, right? So another thing that a lot of people don't know, it's like, okay, like since you can't buy, just rent it, right? But
Mm-hmm.
renting system in Korea is very interesting because we have a system called tonse, which you're essentially giving like a deposit, a huge key money or deposit, which will equal like minimum, if you want to like live in Seoul in a nice area, will be like 500 to 800 or even like $1 million, and that will be your deposit, and you'll be paying additional like monthly rent. So if you're not in
So
the
that's not even just to own, that's just to
no,
rent.
that's to rent, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Like one will imagine that if you have like 800K or 1 million, you should be buying a house,
Right,
right? But
right.
in Korea, you can't. So
Wow.
that's your deposit. So you get a loan over the deposit of your house. But if you don't have a good tax credit
Mm-hmm.
score, like a credit score, you're not going to get the loan. You can't get a house. So you're like trapped.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why we have like trends like being a car poor, which essentially is you get like really nice cars, but you live in a really nice like in a really bad
I
house,
see.
right? So that whole situation with like the pressure of succeeding, going to a good university, succeeding
Mm-hmm.
in life, not owning a house, like all of that is like creating the low birth rates, everyone wanting to become rich really fast. And again, that's the reason why I think a lot of people are kind of obsessed with investing in crypto, right?
Th- that makes sense, and and that's part of the reason we want to cover this, because you can't talk about Web3 games without understanding the
Psychology.
psychology of the consumers and the developers and investors. But back to regulations, because obviously you can't really talk about crypto without talking about regulations. To summarize, so crypto is banned in China. It's heavily regulated in Japan. It sounds like South Korea is starting some regulations, but they didn't have it for a while, which led to situations like Terra Luna Do Kwon. And I think it was that specific, the Terra Luna collapse, that kind of, whether it's forced or initiated some regulation. And and I think these regulations are coming out this year. So maybe you could talk about them a bit.
You know what? The if you actually look when Terra Luna
Mm-hmm.
happened, that was a while back.
Yeah.
If Do Kwon was American, he would have already been in jail.
Right. Right.
If Do Kwon was Japanese, he would have already been in
Right.
jail, right? Chinese, like China, don't even like think about it. Like
Mm-hmm.
he would be like out of history right now. But
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Like they say, like our presidential election is coming soon, so
Mm-hmm.
our current president like has to step down now, and hopefully, what a lot of people are saying is like we're gonna have clear regulations. I think clear regulations will make the like the playing field easier for a lot of companies, but you never know. If crypto is not a main agenda for all these people that want to get in power,
Mm-hmm.
like I don't think the regulations are gonna come that soon.
Got it. But there is, even, unless maybe the new elected president changes it, I think the law is still going to go into effect. And I heard they're going to launch this CBDC, which I think is a
Oh,
big deal. Can you talk
I
about that?
think I think we're far from launching a
Oh
CBDC,
wow,
to be
okay.
honest. And I think a lot of countries are doing like pilot projects doing
Mm-hmm.
CBD. A CBDC actually stands for Central Bank Digital Currency. For those who are wondering what CBDC is, and there are multiple. There's even a map that we can show where shows like all the countries that are pilot testing CBDCs. So there's two types of CBDCs. There's the wholesale CBDCs and retail CBDCs. Most of the countries are actually pilot testing wholesale CBDCs. But and again, like why John is mentioning CBDCs right now is because the Bank of Korea, our central bank, decided to do some pilot testings. And I do not think Bank of Korea will actually launch any form of CBDCs, but it was just we had to show the world that we were pilot testing it just because a lot of countries were giving out like doing some projects, and specifically because China was doing and is still doing a lot of aggressive projects around the yuan, which is their form of the yuan CBDC.
Tell us a little bit about the pros and cons of CBDC, because I heard about it in the the U.S. efforts as well. Like, what are the forget about which government's in charge. Like, what are the pros and cons of having a CBDC?
The So just talking about wholesale CBDCs, it's essentially just the freer flow of money between banks, for example, or corporations. So if you're doing business, if a Korean company is doing business with a Thai company, and that CBDC from both the Bank of Korea and the Bank of Thailand has like a consortium of like an agreement, then it will be processed faster, and it will be processed beyond the operating hours of the Bank of Korea, Bank of Thailand, or even commercial banks, right? So there are certain hours and certain days that banks will not be operating. But if we have CBDCs that transaction across borders will be much easier. That's like a clear benefit. We also talked about like, I think one of the main reasons why the EU one is being promoted so much by the government in China is because um, it is a clear contender, like a option to not use Alipay or WeChat Pay, and they can actually centralize all the payments that Chinese people are so used to doing with their wallets, their phones, and etc. So, and it's also like good to track if people are paying taxes, because
Right, right.
cash payments are so hard to track
Mm-hmm.
taxes, and if you have a digital currency where the government has access to all books, which is kind of scary, you can do so much more as the central bank, right?
Right. All right. So I think we've covered the psychology of crypto, Web3, and different demographics, different geographies. Now we're ready to talk about Web3 and Web3 games. And I'll start off by giving my opinion based on someone who did not come from Web3 games, but I did build one Web3 game, which is, I think, having someone pay you to have fun just doesn't make any product sense. That's not how I designed my Web3 game, which was Ballers. It was on the Flow blockchain. So the way we did it was, um, we made it more of a competition. It's like you have the NFTs anyways.
And that's a pass to enter.
That's the So you need to stake your NFT just to compete. So
Okay.
so I guess yes, it's a pass to enter, but we didn't have any mechanisms to burn yet.
Got it.
Like NBA Top Shots, because
Right, right, right.
they had too many NFTs that had burned it. And in that case, it was kind of interesting because, and I think you're going to cover some of these models as well. So because it was a 10K PFP, there were some plans to make more, but let's just say we didn't make more. So you don't want to really burn it. You have enough, and then you want to keep it to 10K because you reward the early holders. So
Creating
part
the
of
scarcity.
yeah,
the
so part of
price.
the mechanism was, you could rent out your NFT to others, and they could play. And then if they win, then the person who rented out gets some benefits, and you get
Revenue
some benefits
share.
too. Exactly. And then our idea was, how do we get money into this ecosystem, not just from the holders, because I think that's just so limiting. So our idea was, since Ballers was a basketball game, can we get like Nike to sponsor it?
When was this, John?
I gotta send you the
This
link.
is the first time I hear about this.
Oh man, you learn something new every time.
What?
So we're trying to get sponsors like Nike to get involved, because
Makes sense.
it's
Right.
like, they're it's just marketing for them, right?
Mhm.
It's a different form of marketing, and it's brand safe in this case, and
It's just advertisement for for the
exactly,
brands, right?
you get the impressions anyways. It's just through this more quote unquote innovative or different way. So, but that being said, to summarize my point of view on Web3 games is that I think there's definitely utility if you can bring, um, essentially money, right? Because a big part of Web3 games is just like money, whether you like it or not. I think if you could bring the money from other people besides the holders or the buyers or the retail consumers, I think that would be pretty interesting. Because I think there's lots of benefits that are not being captured, like the attention. Even if you're doing it for financial reasons, your attention's still there. It's kind of like Facebook being a free app.
Mhm.
It's not free, you're giving your attention.
Mhm.
So to some degree, there could be Web3 applications, not just games, where you are giving your attention, and yes, you are being monetized, but imagine all of my attention is on the token, and then I could get the money for that, or like a portion of that.
Which there is. Have you heard of a web browser called Brave?
Oh yeah, I heard of it. I never used it though.
Do you know the concept behind it?
I do not.
So Brave, it's a Chromium based browser.
Mhm.
You connect your wallet, and you actually give your preference of like how many ads do you want to see in the browser, and if you allow advertisement to be shown to you, then you will get a token called BAT, browser attention token. So you're exchanging your attention to what you said, John, and then
Mhm.
get a token out of it.
Perfect.
That's the
No,
model.
now I wanna check it out. Okay, so let's talk about uh, Korean players. So my question to you is: are Korean players really into Web3 games because it's fun or for some other purpose?
It's really hard to say because we don't have a breakdown of how many of these like active players are really the legit players that came from the Web2
Right.
games to the Web3
Mm-hmm.
side. But this is like purely my opinion. Like,
Mm-hmm.
don't quote me on this, but this is like my opinion. I think
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people share this opinion as well. But I think if a Web3 game doesn't have that financial upside and that token is not gonna, even like a slight upside, I'm not sure if the current Korean players will be even playing it, right? And maybe we need to do like a study
Mm-hmm.
or like interview because yes, we do have it, when we covered the intro of this like of this podcast, we said that Korea is mobile friendly. Like we are a very mobile game focused and
Mm-hmm.
PC game focused, right? There are a lot of like PC and mobile Web3 games out there. Not even the Korean like Korean ones as well, but Westerns as well. Obviously, they do need to use VPN at the moment
Mm-hmm.
because the Web3 games are right now still in the gray area. But there are so many ways you can play these games. But again, I don't know the breakdown. But my opinion is if there's not a token where there's an upside, I'm not sure if they will be playing it, right? That financial incentive is really important for them. But talking about financial incentive, we do need to talk about a term called airdrop
Mm-hmm.
hunters. And you know how like in DeFi summer, did you do any DeFi, John?
Well,
Were you a
technically,
DGen?
wasn't Terra Luna DeFi
Yeah,
Yeah.
but did you participate in
the event?
Terra's no the Terra's DeFi product,
No, I just purchased
the
it
token?
and I couldn't sell it on time.
Got
That's what happened to me.
got it. So like DeFi is
Yeah.
DeFi stands for decentralized
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
finance, but you just bought the token, right?
Right. Right.
What the DeFi premise is you should have staked your token on the DeFi app that they had.
Oh no, I did stake it.
You did stake it.
Oh, actually, I did purchase, I think Luna, and I think I staked it. I also purchased. I also took some of my ETH and staked it with this Korean company.
Oh.
I forget. It actually it's in like bankruptcy now, but it starts with an H. I forget the name of it.
Did you unstake it?
No, I got out.
Okay,
I'm good.
okay,
I'm
okay.
good. I unstaked it, and then like 2 months later,
Got
they
it.
got affected. Everything got affected.
Right.
But yeah, I got a big return when I staked
Right.
my ETH
And
there.
and staking for
Yeah.
everyone who's not a crypto native person is essentially just like generating yield, just like you will park your money, your cash in a bank and you get interest out of it, right? So staking is the same thing as you wanting to generate interest, but in DeFi summer, which was a period in crypto history where the interest percentage was like up to 150. We even saw
Right.
like 1,000. It was insane, right? So during DeFi summer, there were a lot of people doing like they were called the farming people. So they were essentially farming interest. But in crypto in general, we also have a term called airdrop hunters. And it, in order for, let's just say in simple terms that for a crypto project to have initial validation, they give out airdrops,
Mm-hmm.
which is like free tokens. And they decide they will, in order to be eligible for an airdrop, you need to do certain activities that they tell you. Like if you're a loyal community member in our Discord, this is like checkbox number 1. If you do like some activities in their platform, that's like checkbox number 2. And if you do all these activities at a certain time, for example, like end of March, we're gonna take a snapshot and we're gonna like distribute all the airdrops to the eligible wallets or the eligible people that participated in the airdrop season. Now, games, it's the same thing. A lot of the games, very again, to be honest,
Mm-hmm.
there are very very few Web3 games that are completely live, right?
Right.
We know that like a lot of the Web3 games are either in alpha version right now, beta, playable demo, like very few of them. So all these Web3 games are doing something called play to airdrop, which
Mm-hmm.
you create this, you give them attention, you show them that you're a loyal player, you want to be a loyal player, and you get the token before everyone else. That's why, but it's hard. I think it's hard to say whether these airdrop hunters are going to be, converted to actual players, because a lot of people will do the initial activities just to get the token, just to get the financial upside. And maybe when the actual game comes out, they will never play the game, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Web3 games have a really difficult problem to solve, where it's, who do we target first? Do we
Mm-hmm.
target players that will have so much fun and they'll become loyal players when the actual game comes out? Or do we target airdrop hunters hoping that they will actually convert to our players, right? And finding that golden ratio between loyal Web3 native people and the Web2e, just I love having fun with games, is really hard, right? And it's something that I really wanted to highlight, because it's the Web3 game dynamics is different. So how you will do your marketing will be different. How
Mm-hmm.
much you allocate on community management will be different. How much do you do NFT sales before your alpha? Do you do NFT sales after your alpha? Like it's so different, and people are telling me like it's really complicated if you come from the Web2 fronts, which you can create an amazing game, but honestly in the Web3 games you do need that validation in terms of token price, NFT token price, like how many holders you have, how active the community is. So yeah, like the playing field is different.
Let me add to that. So number
Yeah.
one, the company that I did DeFi in was called Haru Invest.
Which was bad. Like
But
thank
it was good. It
God.
was good until I got out. So that
Thank
was good.
God
So that's
you
number
came
one.
out.
I literally like 2 months before it went bad.
Jesus.
But they were giving insane rates, right? So I was like, oh yeah, sure, why not? I'll stake it for a year.
Right. What was the
Um,
interest rate?
God, I forgot. I think it was like
Triple digit?
it wasn't triple digit. No,
Okay.
it was like 20% or something.
Right. But that's
Yeah.
like
But I think when it compounds, it gets a lot.
Mhm.
I forget the exact number. I just had to get out before it can. So that's number one. Number two is I think I found my Ronin wallet keys somewhere. So that's good. And number three is going back to your community comment for my Web3 game, Ballers. Actually, the funnest part was the community. I actually feel like people were paying to buy the NFT to be part of a community. That I think if that's actual value to the buyer, and I think that's a good part of Web3. Yes, they were financially invested, but they were all just big basketball fans, and they loved it.
Mm.
Um,
So in that
yeah,
model, it was actually pay to own to play.
paid. Yeah. So
Pay.
what? So it's not really a model. You can't really call it a model because what happened was prior to all of the initial Web3 games, it was just the PFPs. So it was just the NFT. It was just PFPs.
So you guys wanted to do PFPs, and then you saw some traction, and then
No, what happened was a lot of the companies did PFPs, and then their community was like, "Give me utility,"
got
and
it.
then I was hired to go build a game as one utility.
I
Other
see.
utilities could include a
Merch.
raffle to a merch
Yeah.
or a raffle that every month we bought tickets to NBA games, and
Right.
then if you're a holder, you could fill out a survey, things like
Mhm,
that,
mhm.
right? Um, but anyways, so let's go. So we kind of like dug into a little bit about the Web3 player perspective and community. And once again, it's hard. We're it's hard to generalize for like okay, what do Korean players want? But for the sake of this podcast, we're trying to summarize it and generalize a bit. Um, Same thing here though. Let's get. I want your opinion on the developer perspective now. So, um, have you seen a difference between how quote unquote Western Web3 games are built versus quote unquote Asian Web3 games are built?
There's 3 types of Web3 games. I think
Mm-hmm.
I need to explain this first. There are 3 main buckets. Everyone calls it different, but the way that I call these buckets is the first bucket is like the off-chain logic. So the game logic is off-chain. It's not on the blockchain, and we have the NFTs, right? I guess your game was similar to that, right? The
Mm-hmm.
game logic was offline, and you have PFPs, NFTs, which was
Right.
like the passes to enter. The second bucket will be off-chain logic and some on-chain infra. So it will be a deeper step than bucket number 1. the extreme core of decentralized games, and these are like, the cyberpunks, like
Mm-hmm.
really like decentralization matters, open source matters, like no one should be owning the game, it's part of the community, will be fully on chain. Very, very rare games are fully on chain. One of the earliest on chain games in the crypto world in history, which is funny, it's only like less than 20 years, but it's called Dark Forest. And Dark Forest was it's the concept itself was really beautiful. Did it succeed? Not really, because very few people, you've never heard about it.
Mm-hmm.
Even crypto native people, like not all of them played the game. And the people that actually created it kind of created like a concept. Like they didn't think the business side of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a
Mm-hmm.
fully on-chain game, but that's it. It never even they were not even close to reach product market fit in the game spectrum. Now, the reason why I'm explaining this is because we need to also understand how the whole play to earn movement started, the whole like
Mm-hmm.
Web3 history started. So we had CryptoKitties that were created by Dapper Labs. And CryptoKitties were the really cute cats where it was basically like the Damagochi style where you just um, upgraded or like pampered your cats and they like, you were just like, taking care of a virtual pet. So the game element was missing. The game element, the team that went a step further with the CryptoKitties concept was Axie Infinity.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why a lot of people think that Axie Infinity is like the father of P2E, because they were the ones who created that. Let's take the cute concepts of CryptoKitties, you have your own digital pet, and you also battle, and you can actually earn something with those battles. And that those were your Axies, right? Um, and then, but then what Axie did, which was even crazier, was that usually the NFTs back then when Axie started, it was like all the blue chip NFTs. Obviously, you had like so many like long tail NFTs, but that's when Bored Apes came out,
Mm-hmm.
Boon Birds came out, like, all these super ultra expensive NFTs where unless you were buying it with your friends with one single wallet, people couldn't even fractionalize those NFTs. So you needed to have liquidity.
Mm-hmm.
Unless
Mm-hmm.
you were insane, you're crazy, and you're just like putting your wealth, like entire wealth in one PFP, right?
Well, but there were a lot of people who did that because I think a lot of the people who bought the Bored Apes
Uh
and
huh.
then the CryptoPunks, they were buying like BTC and ETH when I'm just making up like when it was like a
Right.
dollar. So
Yeah. Okay. Like
because
those are like
most
the
of the people,
true degens.
well, yeah, that's why I saw the true degens were the ones buying all this, and it's funny because it's kind of like the whole opposite thing that we're saying crypto was supposed to do. It's like if you can't build wealth, then you need to be able to buy like a small piece of it, and then the biggest product market fit things or the most expensive things more expensive than this penthouse in Korea probably.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But but
But anyways, yeah.
right. So like Axie was born in those times where
Mm-hmm.
the Western PFPs were so expensive. And the Axies at one point, the actual like cute characters that you needed to own to play were quite expensive. Expensive in the sense where like if you think about it, that this is kind of like the pass to play the game, right? It's a digital asset, and you don't even have guarantees to make like people didn't know how much money they could generate
Mm-hmm.
with an Axie. So what they did was, because they were based in Vietnam and they were based in Southeast Asia, key location, they were able to amass all these players from the Philippines, from Vietnam, like Indonesia, etc., by creating this scholarship model where someone else owned it, and you could do a revenue share with the actual players. So
Mm-hmm.
people were playing on your behalf and earning a living. Like people were not taking normal jobs in the Philippines because they were like, I would rather be an Axie Infinity Guild member or a scholarship recipient and earn my living in dollars. Like I can actually cash out in a earning that is like equivalent to a dollar rather than just earned something in the local currency, right? I'm saying all of this because I think it really made a statement of like how Web3 games operate and how it started in Asia and the West.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, after Axie saw like a huge boom, and now also obviously the crash with P2E and the crash of Axie, they're still going, they're still present, but it's that it, looking at that successful model, there were already Western gaming studios that were saying, okay, this is interesting. P2E is very interesting. Now they can own all these like assets in the game. And they started creating in the West side, they were more of like, yes, you need to own the NFT. The token will have a certain value in the central exchanges. But they were really focused on like, how can we build the community? How can we build a really fun player community? As you said, like, it's fun. Like, it has to be really
Mm-hmm.
cool and fun to be part of the community. Whereas, in my opinion, again, humble opinion, is that on the Asian front, there were great gaming studios that were jumping into the Web3 side, and they were creating really good IP games. But the community side was really hard to build, so they were like shilling on the token upside.
Mm-hmm.
We're like, hey, look at the Philippines, look at Vietnam, like all these players that had no other alternative for like a better job, they actually they're now earning a living through a game that is P2E. So that whole P2E focus on E was on Asia, and P2E focus on P was on the West front. And that is, like a conclusion that's all. Now, today, very different dynamics, I would say. I think the Web3 gaming studios, because we have like now the bigger Web3 AAA gaming studios of Korea, Japan as well, coming into the market, dynamics have changed. The more serious guys have joined the game.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I wouldn't know how that will work with like community building, because honestly, John, I had no idea what it meant to be community manager. Like that
Mm-hmm.
title was like really like, it's like, so what do you guys do? Are you guys just like managing a Discord, like kind of
Mm-hmm.
stuff? But after working with community managers, I'm like, damn, you guys are doing like all the heavy lifting in the B2C side, because I'm really good with B2B.
Right.
B2B is my comfort zone, but B2C is like not only just like managing the Discord, it's like how can we constantly make people to choose us over all the other game alternatives, because Web3 games are not only competing among Web3 games, they're competing against like all the games they can play on mobile, Steam, Epic, etc. So but then it's not only the financial incentive, right? So all these community managers on the Web3 side, they're focused on like not only shilling the NFTs and tokens, it's like, hey, let's jump on the game, it's really fun, we can like, you know.
And that's why I think even today, especially, so I've been out of the Web3 game stuff for a while. So I was the head of games and I was a community manager, essentially, because then you have to give these people roadmap updates. Frankly, whenever they request it, when they tag you, you better respond. We had back then, it was still called Twitter Spaces all the time,
Uh-huh.
and people can ask you any questions. Another crazy strategy, by the way, which we kind of did deliberately, was, um, there's like tension between the head of games, which is a utility for the token and the NFTs, and then the head of the project. So sometimes I would not get the things I needed or funding to go faster from the head of the project, and I would complain about it too. And then the community loved that stuff. Yeah, because
Really?
then they're like, "Oh, you're on our side now."
Good.
Right?
Right, right, right,
It's
right.
very interesting way, but I think even today, but no one's really doing like 10K PFPs anymore, right? So, but if you
You never
did,
know if it's
that's
bouncing
true.
back. But
That's true. But I think if you're doing 10K PFPs, or you're making a game, the head of product has to be the community manager.
uh,
I don't like outsourced community management. I think that never works.
yeah, that never works. Not
Sorry,
even
but
in
it
like
works. It works for
NFTs.
like traditional games like Blizzard. You have like the game's just so big and you need a community team.
Yeah,
Yes.
but it's different, because now that I think about it, like
Right.
Web3 games, the people that you're talking to are essentially your shareholders.
Exactly. And they're more
Like,
sophisticated.
yeah, like
Yeah.
they're not your players that are just like complaining about something buggy about your game.
Right. Right.
These are
Right.
your shareholders. You better
Exactly.
take care of your shareholders, right?
Yeah.
Because if there's like a bank run where everyone's just
Hmm.
like selling their NFTs, then bye game, like
Exactly. Exactly.
so it's censored, like the whole like dynamics of like community building.
Hmm.
And obviously I'm pretty sure that like Asian people will be able to do community building. Again,
Hmm.
I mean, we're like a very collectivistic
Right.
culture,
Right.
right?
Right.
But it's harder because all these games, in order to be global, you need to do it in English. You need
Right.
to understand the player nuance that is not only about Korea. Like, how do you communicate? Like, like even like how do you end the game? Like there's different ways of how to say
Hmm.
like good game, like GG.
Hmm.
Like, but maybe like GG in Korea is different, and it's
Hmm.
different in like Europe is different. Like, but then how do you actually like be as neutral with that demographic front, but also like go global at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like because all these American companies, like English is the main language,
Mm-hmm.
you guys just have that community building from day one. But it takes harder. It's a harder task for Asian companies, because who do you hire? Do you hire like a Korean American to do that?
Mm-hmm.
Like, do you hire just a native speaker? I think it's stuff that seems kind of obvious, but it's a challenge.
I think you have the CEO do it. No, seriously, I think if I were to
For
do a
all
Web3
these
project,
like triple A gaming companies.
yeah, I think if I were to start a Web3 game or just a Web3 project, and I'm the CEO, I have to be in Discord at least 2 hours a day.
So with Nexon CEO comes in.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm
That'd
not
be
him.
yeah,
But
yeah.
if I were him, I would.
I'll
But
do
but,
it,
but also
yeah.
but also it's a. I would say that's a big publicly traded company. I would say it would be the head of that project.
Right.
Um, okay, so actually let's talk about this a little bit because I was doing Web3 games when they were like peak popularity, and then it went to peak.
Okay,
It kind
John,
of died.
I need to
Yeah,
do. I want to give a clarification
sure.
here. But I think you were doing it when it was peak play to earn days.
It was peak play to earn, but it was also peak like liquidity for
Everything.
NFTs and
Right.
everything. Yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Right.
So everything was good.
It, and it was like rosy. You could just like launch any PFP collection and
No,
everything
no, but then it
worked.
died. This all happened in 6 months. It was peak, like everything was positive, and then it all died, and then Metaverse became the thing,
Okay.
and then people stopped, and it was not just Web3 games, it was crypto, like crypto. What do you call it? Like it was just it
The
was a
bear
bear market. It was
crash,
a crazy
right.
bear market.
Okay.
Everyone stopped doing stuff.
But the reason why,
Yeah.
so these days we don't call it P2E anymore.
Right,
That's the
right,
interesting
right.
thing. I think
Interesting.
the P2E stigma is
Mhm.
so strong now that even people building in the Web3 space, we just call it Web3 games.
Yeah, actually, what's funny back then, some of the games thought the stigma of Web3 was so bad, they don't even call themselves a Web3 game.
They were calling it games.
They're just calling it a game, but they have Web3 components. Or it's like people then Metaverse had the stigma, so people didn't call themselves a Metaverse company. It was a company that did
Virtual
Metaverse
world.
stuff. Exactly, virtual worlds. It's funny, and then like now AI has a stigma, so you don't want to use the word AI. You want to say, oh yeah, we just do some machine learning or something.
Which
So
is back to like 2014 because machine learning was like.
yeah, it seriously went from Web3 to Metaverse to AI, and obviously all elements of these three has
Or,
some new and old things,
right.
and there's some overlap too.
Mm-hmm.
But tell us about because I just don't play Web3 games anymore. What's one of the most popular Web3 games today, and like what's so special about them?
Some bias here, I
Sure.
will say. I mean, like, we have the Shrapnels.
Mm-hmm.
Shrapnel is a very, very popular game. Not because they don't have a full commercial. Their full commercial version is not out.
Mm-hmm.
It's a portion of it, but they just got a lot of traction and a lot of noise, and I think that's why people think that it's like a very popular game, and a very seasoned team. They know how to create that cloud, that noise, like community management. It's really cool. And Shrapnel is built on Avalanche. That's why on GDC they actually had like a lot of activation events. So there was a specific house where all the KOLs in the Web3 front, the content creators in the Web3 side, were all staying in that same house, and they're all part of this DAO, Decentralized Autonomous Organization, called Wolves DAO. And the Wolves are the best, the top content creators, and it was called the Wolves Den.
Mm-hmm.
And the Wolves Den was like heavily sponsored by Shrapnel. So throughout 3 days of the main like GDC days, they were having like tournaments.
Mm-hmm.
So they were like creating tons of noise around Shrapnel. So Shrapnel is one. The second one is Peril. Peril is a card game. And what's cool about Peril, I even saw the expansion because they were demoing the expansion during GDC, and they had a booth in GDC, is that you could play the entire first set without even buying the NFT or without knowing that it's Web3. And the way that they put it is, if you don't have the NFT and you don't want to get the token upside, then you'll just see a 0 on your token, right? Then people will click. It was like, oh, I played the game. Like, why is my currency 0? Then that's how they say like, oh, if you want to like, this is an optional thing, but if you want to like generate some form of income, digital income, then you need to have the NFT, and this is how like the Web3 conversion starts, right? So
Yeah.
it was nice how to like they're like playing around with different mechanics of like the Web2 side, Web3, and it's you can play the entire game without doing the Web3 elements, which is very different to the times where you were building your project, because before, in order to start the game, you had to connect your wallet. That was the sign up login mechanism. The user experience always started with you buy the NFT in a marketplace like OpenSea. That NFT gets parked in your wallet. You log in with that wallet, and the game will recognize you're a holder, and then you start the game. Now, the Web3 games that we're talking about here are you can do the entire thing with very just the social like auth system such as Gmail, email, whatever, Discord, and then you can start the game, and then they will like say, hey, would you like to connect your wallet? Would you like to like log in with your wallet? Do you have a wallet? Let us guide you to create a wallet, like all that shenanigans.
I'm gonna send you my white paper because maybe I should pay more attention to my game, because I think we didn't implement this feature, but we thought about this as well. So we had a whole section where you don't need an NFT to even play, and well, it is some gambling involved, but so basically you log in every month. Every month you get a fake currency that you cannot even sell. It's not an NFT. It's not on the blockchain. It's just like a digital currency, like that you can find in any video game. And with this fake currency, you could bet on the matches, because the matches are happening 24/7 with our games.
Oh, but can you participate in the matches?
No, you cannot until you buy the NFT.
Right, but you're betting on
But
it.
you could bet on it with fake money that has no consequence.
Can you earn on your betting?
No, you could keep. It's just like an extra currency
for engagement.
For engagement that you could go up.
That
and
makes sense,
we have another mechanism where you could donate it to do something,
which is like delegation. In crypto, it's called delegation.
Oh, interesting.
This
I gotta
really
send you this. This is good. This now I'm making another Web3 game. Okay, so let's talk about.
Oh, can I just
mention
one more Web3 game?
Yes.
So it's called Pirate Nation.
Yes.
It's a team called Proof of Play.
Mm-hmm.
And what's really cool about Pirate Nation is, Pirate Nation is built on Arbitrum. So Shrapnel is built on Avalanche. Pirate Nation is built on Arbitrum, on a subnet. And Pirate Nation is the flagship Web3 game of A16Z Games. And what's really cool about Pirate Nation is that it's the most on-chain game, or I'm not sure if they were like fully on-chain, but it's a seamless game. It's actually really fun, and you wouldn't know that it's a buggy Web3 game if you know what I mean. Because there were like a lot of, I think what happens with Web3 and why there was like a big anti-Web3 sentiment in GDC in the previous years was because the quality of the games were not good.
That's true.
But now we see like serious seasoned people coming in and building Web3 games, and you can see Proof of Play, like Pirate Nation, Shrapnel, Peril. It looks nice. It is a solid game. So yeah, I just wanted to highlight on that last game.
That's great. Okay, so maybe you could give a quick summary on Korean Web3
Let's go.
games and game devs, because I know we talked about Axies and we gave you like a broader overview of kind of like what happened at GDC. So what has happened in the Korean Web3 dev scene, and where is it going?
Okay, so Korea gaming front were two sides. First historically, we a couple years back, Kakao, we covered Kakao in multiple episodes. Kakao, the tech company, the messaging, the company that started with our WhatsApp, our messenger app, had created its own blockchain layer 1 called Clayton. Clayton was, and Kakao also had their kind of like venture studio. At one point, it was like really hard to like put a pulse on like what exactly they were doing, but I would just call it venture studio called GroundX as well. And they also had like something called Crossed. So it was like the Kakao blockchain ecosystem. So obviously, because the backer is Kakao, which is essentially like our big tech, the number 1 or 2 big tech of Korea, because we have Kakao and Naver. They wanted to create this ecosystem on the blockchain where all the dApps created in the Kakao conglomerate and and obviously like maybe other like startups building some on-chain element to be on Clayton, right? And so Clayton had its own token called Clay as well, and initially they got really good traction. But if you think about it, it made sense because the prospects of Kakao, such a big internet company such as Kakao doing layer one meant that everything that they will build in the future, if they were allowed to do something blockchain, will be on their chain. So it will be a vibrant ecosystem. And if you wanted to partner with any of the subsidiaries and you wanted to do blockchain, it will be a seamless transaction. And you just got the, the reputable, trustworthy clouds that Kakao had.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the games, or even like games, game like apps, were building on Kakao. And because they were able to get the Korean language support, which is huge for Korean, even game devs or any like startup. That happened. There were a lot of complications, unfortunate, like political regulations and all of that. Clayton ecosystem died and it's slowly dying as well. So all the games that were initially built on Clayton now have to migrate. And that at the same time, we also had another contender which was built by WeMix. I'm not sure if you made you mentioned we made or we mixed in the previous episodes,
No,
or
no,
we
no,
did it.
we haven't.
So this company, this game studio, they do both in-house development, and they're now like acting more like a publishing company as well.
Mm-hmm.
But they got their initial traction in the Chinese market, and they saw that. I guess they got the whole like Chinese blockchain trend that when they were entering the Chinese market. So the chairman and the founder of that company decided to go aggressive, and he was one of the most aggressive game dev that went on the Web3 front. When all the game devs like Nexon and Csoft, like all these people are like, no, hell no, we're not gonna touch Web3. He was
Mm-hmm.
like, we're gonna go Web3, and he did it. You know what? Their flagship game called Mirror had on-chain assets, and it was all their tokens like pumped like crazy, and they created a successful playbook. Because of this, all the game devs were like, whoa, you can actually do like that, like. And then this company was like, I think like lower on like maybe like the top 30 of the market cap in game devs, and they like jumped massively because of the blockchain side. They decided to create their own layer called WeMix as well. WeMix is doing the same thing where they're approaching all these game devs and saying, hey, you know what? Like, Clayton doesn't come from a gaming background. We come from a gaming background. We created this layer, this blockchain, because for our games and to publish other games on our blockchain. And that's how they started getting like, whispering and all the game devs. And we had a lot of like initial Korean game devs building on Weemix as well, and they were like entering to the Weemix ecosystem, which means that they were using all the other toolings such as the wallets, the analytics, their marketplace, etc. But the problem is, John, with all of this, Clayton Weemix, it's not the technology of like how good the blockchain is.
Mm-hmm.
No one knows about it. Why? Because first of all, Clayton was really hard to use for a foreigner because you needed to buy clay, which was not listed in the Western centralized exchanges. Like even using Kakao Talk is not honestly
Right.
foreigner friendly. It's
Mhm.
it's a hard UX for a non-Korean to use, right?
Mhm.
So imagine all of that, but in a blockchain, which blockchain adds 2 or 3 more layers of the whole user experience, right?
Mhm.
So that obviously these game devs were coming to the blockchain space because they wanted to go more global, but ended up in a very Korean-made, Korea-focused, Asia-focused ecosystem compared to other layer one, layer twos, or even like roll-ups, right? So the game devs that are now jumping into the ecosystem are choosing from day one, let's go Western. We need to choose a partner. We need to choose a layer, a blockchain that will just put us on the global map from day one. That's why they're talking to people like Base, which is like the chain that was created using the OP stack, the optimism stack, and it's an EVM compatible, so which means it has compatibility with the Ethereum mainnet, right? And it's because it's a US centric, Western centric chain. They do co-marketing together, and then people that don't even know these Korean companies, they're like, okay, this is a game that is now on this chain. Whereas the Korean game devs that were building on the Korean chains, they had such a hard time to penetrate like beyond Korea. And that's like what's what happened in the Web3 gaming Korean side, what was different in the Western front. I hope that it's different now from this cycle and forward. So perfect example is, you know, we talked about Maple Story.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they were the last ones to actually declare that they're gonna do something Web3. They were honestly, I thought they were never gonna do Web3.
Mm-hmm.
They were publicly saying we will not touch Web3. And I think it was last year that they said, "Oh, hey guys, we're gonna amend what we said. We're gonna do Web3." And not only a Web3 like different game, but they're using their crown jewel, the Maple Story IP, to
Mm-hmm.
create a universe on crypto, and they chose Avalanche. So that shows like, okay, like the latecomers were able to see what all the kind of like mistakes that the previous like the people that jumped first did, and now they can choose, okay, I think it's much better to just partner with a foreign layer and just do something on their chain.
That's great. And you know, as always, we're gonna link your 65 page, 69 page deck in the show notes. So, you know, all of this Web 2 development, or for lack of a better, all of this Korean game history and development, which also led to Web 3, I think is a natural segue to Metaverse. From a broader perspective, it seems like the Korean government, people, private companies, they seem to get caught up in every hype cycle, like whether it's Web3, Metaverse, or AI. And I think that's a good thing in the sense of they know that investing technology is really important for their economy. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I think South Korea is a country that really cares about that. Israel, Saudi Arabia, you know, China's really focused. I mean, everyone's focused on technology, but there are a couple countries who are just like going like all in on different segments.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that's quite
All
interesting.
segments. It has to be all segments.
It has to be all segments. Well, I think from a Metaverse perspective, from a country level investment, maybe not total dollars, but just the words they use, I think Korean must be like a top 10 country.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about that for a second, because from the traditional game Web 2 game perspective, Koreans are most well known for MMOs, and that's really just the perfect precursor to Metaverse platforms, Metaverse games, whatever you want to call it, because they had three main features, which is online, multiplayer, and social. So from the global perspective, this Metaverse hype started when I was at Facebook, and it changed its name to Meta, October 2021. I was there. I joined in April 2021. And in that quarter, just one measurement of how companies were getting hyped into this, the word Metaverse was mentioned 541 times by
Oh my
118
God.
companies in earnings reports. And the next quarter, it went down a bit, but I'm sorry, it went up a little bit, and it was 552 times by 170 companies. And then we'll attach a chart that shows you kind of how it went down from then. But what's interesting about Korea is that it doesn't just seem to get into like a sector just for fun. Like when I mentioned the esports episode was Korea is still investing in esports stadiums today, and they were the first country to have an esports agency at the government level. So, so going back to the government, maybe give us like some timelines and some efforts of what Korea has done as it relates to the metaverse.
I think people relate Facebook's name change
Mm-hmm.
to Meta as like the beginning of like the
Right.
metaverse. But what people don't realize is that, there are a lot of companies like, investing in the metaverse. And
Mhm.
Korea is one of them where
Sure.
like, the Korean government has been investing like millions in like the
Mhm.
whole metaverse front by either doing LP investments to funds that are investing in metaverse projects, or like incentivizing conglomerates such as even the telcos such as like SK Telecom, the Neighbors, the Kakaos to do something in the metaverse. and this was like way before Facebook's name change, right?
Right.
So in May 2021, which is like I guess like also before the
It
meta
was
change.
before this, yeah, like
Yeah,
6 months.
it announced that there was going to be a Metaverse alliance, and it was
Mm-hmm.
all the major companies. I think it was like 17 companies. And in 2022, the Ministry of Science and ICT, um, they announced a pan-government strategy of Metaverse as part of the Digital New Deal 2.0
Mm-hmm.
initiative. And Metaverse is one of the 6 areas that the ministry was focused on and is still focused on. And the other 5 were like obviously like as I said, the all sectors were like artificial intelligence, semiconductors, 5G, 6G communication, quantum, and cybersecurity. But like if you look at it like the consumer front, it's AI and Metaverse.
Mm-hmm.
And Metaverse was always highlighted on all the companies were doing Metaverse. Do you remember like the presentation, the information that I gave you? Like even commercial banks, the biggest
Yep.
commercial
Yep.
banks,
You're right.
were creating their own mobile Metaverse, which is
Mm-hmm.
really silly because like why would a bank need to create their own Metaverse rather than
Right.
joining a Metaverse? But that's how invested everyone was, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So another example, clear example of a government doubling down on the Metaverse sector was the Seoul city government made a digital twin of Seoul called Metaverse Seoul. I don't know if a lot of people are still using this, but it was citizens were like, we were able to access all these like services, whether like, oh, I want to renew my driver's license, and
Mm-hmm.
you didn't have to physically go there, but you could have done it with a Metaverse office front. And then one of the best innovations of 2022, selected by Time, it is the world's first Metaverse platform developed by the Seoul Metropolitan Government. I guess it's the same project, I will assume.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's yeah, and then they also announced something called the Soul Wallet, and then we also have like all the certificates. Whether certificates include like where I went to school, like my
Yeah.
diploma,
Right.
again like my driver's license, my we even have like our e-passport all of there. So it's really cool. It's actually convenient once the major companies started to adopt these
Mm-hmm.
certificates. So I can actually verify and sign contracts through KakaoTalk, the document service that I told you, because they have my official documents
Right.
on their on the server under document drive.
Cool. Yeah. I think in addition to the government interest and government support, a lot of private companies in Korea are interested in the metaverse too. The biggest is Zepeto, which is not only the biggest metaverse platform in Korea but in Asia. I'm using some old numbers. They roughly have 20 million monthly active users. I don't think they've ever published their daily active users. Then there's Iflin, which is what you showed me. I also played, essentially it's a game called Hagen. Hagen is the name of the developer. The game's called Play Together. Um, it looks like, basically it looks like Roblox, but it's like Roblox, but primarily popular maybe in Southeast Asia.
Mm-hmm.
That was a vibe I got based on the people and the language you're using in the chat. Come to Us has something as well. I'm not sure if it's called Come2Verse, because the Come2Verse I think is a subsidiary that happens to do something metaverse related. I forgot the name of their metaverse project itself.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think Krafton has like a JV with Naver called Over There. I haven't heard of any updates from that.
Over there is a Web3 thing.
It's a Web3 thing. So that's another thing, right? Like I kind of mentioned to you, and we couldn't figure out the exact details, but there's a lot of overlap between Metaverse and Web3 or blockchains for Koreans.
Right,
I don't know why.
right,
Like the
right.
Soul, the digital twin, it also had a wallet.
Yes.
My high level takeaway is that uh, maybe it's because they had, Koreans had the most high speed internet or broadest access first, but people are not. People think esports is normal. People think that virtual idols is normal. I think I saw some stat in New York Times that says 70% of all virtual idols and like streamers are from Korea.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So like it's just a society that embraces digital.
We're
and to
gonna
some
be
degree,
the first country that
Yeah.
reaches singularity points, if that
Okay.
makes it. Like, we're, in the beginning. So talking about like
Yeah.
avatars and celebrities, all of
Mm-hmm.
that. So the first like public virtual model was this model. The name I forgot. I forgot her name, but she's seen everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
She's hired by all the brands, and it feels like she's a human being. Like she's not an AI for people. And what's crazy is like John, before flying to the Bay
Mm-hmm.
Area, I went to like the major shopping mall in Yeouido,
Mm-hmm.
the biggest, like one of the biggest malls in Seoul. It's called it's owned by the Hyundai department store, and then the top floor you have like lifestyle brands, and you can have like a lot of pop-up stores, and there were tons of people lining up. And I'm like, oh, what's happening? Like
Mm-hmm.
I was curious, so we went close, and the entire wrapping of the pop-up store were like animated avatars, and I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, is it a like a like a anime pop-up? And then someone told me that they're idols.
Oh.
They're AI
AI.
animated
Mm-hmm.
idol K-pop bands, and like there were a lot of like other foreigners who actually flew to Korea to get and you could take like a virtual picture with them because they will appear as a
Right.
hologram.
Right.
I was like, like it's been months since I've been to Korea, but this is like the kind of thing that we're into. This is
Right.
crazy.
So kind of looking at these metaverse experiences platforms, I think a similar story emerges where, on the traditional gaming side, China, their neighbors, China and Japan, had such big companies doing really well in gaming. On the metaverse platform perspective, on the metaverse front, it's really the U.S. companies. It's like Roblox.
Right.
So Roblox, I'm using older figures, 52.2 million DAO, and I mentioned the 4 million DAO for Play Together. Minecraft, it has 140 million MAU, but it's not a free to play game. You actually have to buy it first, so it's often not like using comparison points. But the point is, Zepeto is 20 million, and it's essentially free to play. So Minecraft is just way bigger, and Roblox is just way bigger, which I think is sucking a lot of oxygen out. But I do think whether you're a Korean game dev or a corporation, what Metaverse could provide is UGC, which you talked about. I think Koreans are to some degree, maybe not like the OGs of UGC, but I think just Koreans are very well tuned to UGC as a mechanism to generate content. So that could be one reason why you see corporates involved as well, because it's engagement, and also at the end of the day, if your platform becomes popular, your users are making you content. You don't have to do it. You have to create some fun or some monetization to get them to get the flywheel up and going.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's clear that the Korean government is still investing in the metaverse, is still in its top 6 investment areas from a government perspective. Companies are still interested as well, Korean companies, despite metaverse being less popular, given that AI is like the number one thing now. Um, let's talk about Korean customers and how are they using these metaverse experiences?
uh, 2022, Korea Media Panel did the survey, and in the Metaverse service, they said they asked a question whether like how many different types of services related to Metaverse have you used, and 4.2% of all respondents said yes,
Mm-hmm.
which honestly it seems like a small number.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure if this is like an accurate number, to be honest, because I think it's higher. I think Koreans think that the only type of metaverse is Epitom. I'm just gonna throw an opinion here
I
because I think there's
see.
other forms of metaverse that people don't realize that it's a metaverse. I'm just
Mm-hmm.
gonna say my opinion, but again, this survey has been happening since 2010, and the metaverse survey questions were added in 2022, which shows like we really wanted to track of like how much the consumer is using metaverse, like different types of metaverse
Mm-hmm.
services. Animal Crossing isn't what most people would consider a metaverse. So again, like this is like along the lines of like what I've said.
Yeah.
So Zepeto is the leading metaverse platform in Korea, and which makes sense because like Zepeto is something that like we should also highlight. It's like It's a project that is owned by Naver Z, and Naver
Mm-hmm.
Z is a subsidiary of Naver, and Naver is the Google of Korea. So for us, it makes sense. And then I just wanted to highlight, if Google is doing something in the States, it just, it makes sense that they will be like a predominant player, right?
Right. But not every, Google kills their products all the time. Not everything works
Absolutely,
out. And I
right.
think, when I even look at Zepeto, it is doing, I think Zepeto is winning in Asia, unless Roblox reveals the breakdown of their player base, and maybe it's actually pretty close to each other. Um, but frankly, I think Zepeto hasn't broken out globally,
Mm-hmm.
and I love the team there. I work with them. I just don't think it is gonna break out,
Mm-hmm.
especially when you have so much attention and just like a bigger publicly traded company like Roblox getting as much capital as they need.
Right.
It's different when you're, I mean, because you said like Zepeto is owned by Naver Z, a subsidiary of Naver. So it's just you're one layer down, right? And it's
Right.
harder to get the funding. And based on my experiences at Walmart, where we launched, we integrated some of our Walmart brands into the leading game in Zepeto. I think that just if it was purely like marketing figures or engagement, the numbers were great. However, when these big brands like Walmart get into these experiences, a lot of it's frankly just for PR and other
Mm.
purposes. And like the trade, the trades, so called, whether it's like retail trades or gaming trades or tech trades, no one really paid attention to Zepeto from a global or US trades perspective. But
Right.
obviously, a lot of the Korean or Asian um, kind of like publications care, and for whatever reason, Financial Times. Maybe Financial Times is big in Asia, but the only newspaper that ever reported
Interesting.
Zepeto is Financial Times.
God.
Yeah, go Google Zepeto, and any from a newspaper perspective, like the last 3 articles are all Financial Times.
So you know how like Zepeto is, I'm pretty sure they're trying to like break into the Western market.
Mm-hmm.
They do have good traction, but you even said like it would be really hard for them to like pass over
Mm-hmm.
Roblox, right? The difference is big. I think the same thing will happen with Web3 Asian games and West games,
Mm-hmm.
which is like it's following the really similar game where like yeah, they have really good traction in Asia, but like it's gonna be way more difficult, or even like Asian games in general, like to just penetrate the Western front, because they like all these Western games can amass all the ammunition that they can and do it better, right?
And one more point on that before we go into overall summary conclusion, which is even from a Roblox perspective, it's hard to be a developer. So I know we talked about UGC, right? So Roblox
Mm-hmm.
UGC, Zepeto UGC. The days of just having a regular user create the content, they're both too advanced for that now. Some of these contents they're done by professional studios and developers, right?
I see.
So that's why you don't see a lot of professional developers on Zepeto, because the ecosystem just isn't that big. Actually, if anything, even Roblox has trouble getting a lot of developers
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
the biggest Roblox game. Once again, we're using just like estimates based on what we read in reports or whatnot. Like the companies have never reported this. We think they make probably $50 million in annual revenue, and I think it's Adopt Me. So if that is the pinnacle of revenue for that platform, you can even see a lot of VCs not that interested,
Right.
right? I think VCs were interested. They funded a couple of they funded a couple of studios that said they were going to do all three, so Roblox, Minecraft, and Fortnite. But frankly, those are three completely different platforms. You can't
Right.
do all three without a big team.
Uh-huh.
So the teams that focus specifically on Roblox just hasn't really broken out.
Mm-hmm.
You probably haven't heard of a really super successful Roblox studio.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, I think Fortnite has a potential because you could port your game outside to Unreal onto Steam into bigger distribution platforms.
Mm-hmm.
So I mentioned all this because Zepeto, maybe for these platforms you just need scale. There has to be some scale where it even makes sense for a company to make $50 million a year,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't think you can. I know you can't as a developer on Zepeto today.
Right.
I don't know what the exact number is, but it's definitely not 50 million.
Right.
Maybe the top developer
But
is
is
making like single
Zepeto
digits.
targeting like these bigger gaming studios
They're
or like
they
individual use
they
PCs?
want to, but whether it's part of their stated strategy or not, I think they have to because the whole point of UGC is you let other people create content. So if other people, like a 3D asset, whether it's in Zepeto or Roblox, is roughly the same thing. So you want to have that 3D asset, but they made it different. It's kind of like the green text bubble from from like Android to Apple or whatever, or vice versa. You know what I'm talking
Uh huh.
about?
Uh huh. Uh huh.
So it's a little bit different because my team has developed assets on Zepeto and Roblox. I don't know if it's on purpose. Maybe they're just different platforms.
Right.
You can't just like copy and paste assets.
Of
You
course,
kind of
it
have to like
can't be
redesign it,
it can't be
right?
translated, right?
Right. So it's quite hard. So you're competing globally. So whether you're a individual content creator or you're a developer, where are you gonna go? Well, you're gonna go where there's the best economics,
Of
probably,
course, of
right?
course.
And the challenge of so I think Zepeto and Roblox actually have the same challenge, which is you only get roughly 30% of the revenue. That's
Mm-hmm.
stated on their websites because of Apple and Google. See, that's the tricky part. And actually, the crazy part about Epic is that Epic has had lawsuits against both Apple and Google for this very topic.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of their developers are just because Fortnite is also available on PC. Roblox is available on PC too, but most players like their kids are not using PC. So Fortnite developers have higher economics just because they're giving up 30% less,
Right.
roughly speaking. I don't know the exact percentage that Fortnite takes, but I think it's all public online.
Mm-hmm.
So I mentioned all this because Zepeto is actually not just competing against Roblox; it's competing against Fortnite too.
Okay.
So it, so so yeah, maybe there's like a breakout moment. Maybe there's like a special thing. In our Netflix TV series episode, we're gonna talk about how COVID brought global attention to Korean TV shows. So
Mm-hmm.
that was the moment. So maybe there's gonna be maybe it's like a Web3 thing. Maybe it's like a global event that
Right. Right.
somehow
Right.
takes some Korean game or genre that they specialize in, like MMOs, to the top. One potential way of this happening is kind of my former team at Amazon. What they've been doing, what they found successful, is publishing games from built in Korea and Japan, but globally,
Right. Right. Right.
and that has seemed to work at least for Lost Ark,
Uh huh.
which became, I think, it became a top 10 game on Steam in terms of all time peak players. So maybe if more of that happened, that could build some traction. But that's really just for like a quote unquote Web2 game. Metaverse, I think for anything UGC, there's only going to be one or two winners.
But maybe that's the reason why Zepeto is also playing around in the peripheral with crypto as well.
Yes, so it's funny because with this ETX,
Yeah.
you mentioned that to me, and yeah, it seems like crypto and Web3 is a really good solution for Korean companies based on their situation, which is
Right.
fascinating. And
Right.
and we don't, I frankly don't even know if it's still going to matter or break out or help them, but at least now that we know like the history and then the reason why, the psychology behind the consumers, we can see why it's happening. It makes logical sense.
Mm-hmm.
So I know we covered a lot. Would you do the pleasure of giving us an
Overall
overview, overall summary?
Right. Okay. So first point, Korea didn't have a strong start in games, especially when it comes to competing against or relatively to their neighboring countries. Both really large economies, great talent, already established gaming studios, and then this is also a comparison to the Korean TV shows and musics, as we said. Second point is, despite not having a strong domestic game dev ecosystem, it did become the home of eSports, as
Mhm.
you've covered in your previous, as we covered in the previous episode. And then we have ubiquitous broadband access. We have the really common culture of PC banks
Mhm.
and the culture acceptance of gaming. It was like 70% of, what was it, like 80% of all the entire population played some sort of game, something like that.
Yeah.
Separately, we also see the whole trend of crypto becoming like a mass adoption on not only in Asia but specifically in Korea, and then we saw the reasons why crypto is becoming, we were reaching a strong product market fit in that side of the world. There's a lot of liquidity, there's a lot of projects being born, and just because of the regulations, Korea just makes it like kind of like kind of the safe haven, I would say, but still like gray area safe haven of all these like crypto activities. Yeah, and then we also have like Singapore. The dynamic side is happening in Singapore, lesser extent in Hong Kong, and again like all the attention of the crypto hub in Korea. Uh, Now tying that crypto product market fit, that mass adoption, that increase of liquidity, crypto liquidity in Korea, plus the game devs, that makes it a very interesting tie, and which is something that we covered. And then we have we talked about the metaverse front. How is it different to the Western competitors such as Fortnite, Roblox? And then how the metaverse companies in Korea are also experimenting with blockchain and why we think they're experimenting with blockchain. Yeah, and maybe the reason why they're experimenting with blockchain is because they need to find that pocket or that like small entryway to a global or a bigger market. And that was it.
Great. All right. Good chatting with you again.
Thank you, John.
Okay.